to a special episode of Cultivate, Jessica Taghap, a new podcast exploring different art forms and their creative processes through interviews with some of the most exciting artists working today. In a special bonus episode of Cultivate, recorded just before the heady combination of my birthday and the Christmas holiday, we're letting loose and going super casual here at Cultivate HQ. What was initially intended as a chat about our mutual love for the culinary world and Anthony Bourdain turned into a chat about our origins in what I call the dark dungeons of the netherworld that is Broadway fan forums, particularly one such forum pertaining to a certain show called Spring Awakening. Here we discuss our individual fan journeys with the show, parasocial relationships, and Broadway fan culture past and present. Yes, I can.
Yeah, I was on mute, but I thought I turned the video on. Okay,
Oh,
video
yeah.
could be on. Yeah, now can you see me? Hi.
Yes.
Okay,
Hi. How are you?
not too bad. I'm glad we finally got this set up. So,
No, yeah, same here. So, um, so what did you have for dinner?
what I had for dinner, nothing super exciting. I just had hot dogs. I was gonna make,
Nice.
I had these shrimp in the freezer, and I was gonna make something with that, like with that and some rice and some other things. I didn't really feel like doing all of that. And then I have these also had these Jamaican patties that I was going to try and use up, but my stomach wasn't feeling that, you know, great. So I'm like, let me just
Ah,
get something simple. So hot dogs it was.
gotcha, gotcha. You didn't have to like rush or anything on my account.
Yeah, no, I
So,
wasn't.
okay.
I was like, after reviewing my options, I was like, I just do not feel like putting together a whole fancy dinner today. It's one of those kind of days.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I feel you there. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, that's always a solid option.
right.
Um, yeah.
We do have.
Yeah. So yeah, well, thank you for agreeing to do a little chat.
Oh my God, anytime. I'm glad to
Yeah.
be here. I
Hmm.
see you have the whole setup going on. You have the headphones, you have the mic, you are
Yep.
dialed in here and ready
I
to
am
go.
dialed in. Yep. Yeah. No
You have
turning
all the
back now.
accessories lined up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, got a whole setup going on here. Um, yeah, so we said that we were gonna talk a little bit about the culinary world, I suppose. Do a little like informal
Mhm.
chat. Well, I guess I should probably like preface this whole thing and say that we have known each other for quite a while.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah. So,
So, well,
um,
if we are on air right now, then I
uh-huh.
guess I guess really, I don't think you've introduced me at all. I don't think your
No,
podcast following, your fans have any idea who I am.
no.
So
I
we should
mean, at this point, I don't know how many fans I have really at this point, but for the
you fake it till you
benefits
make
of
it.
those who may or may not be curious enough to listen, yeah, so I've known Josh for quite a while. Um, we
Long time.
met
We
we
go way
met
back.
in the dark dungeons of the netherworld that we'll call Broadway fan forums, particularly of a certain Broadway show called Spring Awakening, um, which was a very interesting time.
Yes, it was. It was very interesting indeed.
Yeah.
I've known Jess for it feels really weird to say this, but probably like 15 years at this point. Um, and yeah, it was, we met, like she said, in the dark dungeons of internet fandom, which, um,
Yep.
I mean, it's like when you meet under those circumstances, and you've seen all the like awkward, late teens, early 20s obsessive fan behavior. Uh, Generally, it leads to some pretty great friendships, and that's what happened in this case. So
Yeah.
we
And I
we
feel like,
basically just
oh,
no go ahead.
sorry. Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, and I feel like the Broadway community is a particularly like great place for like forging those friendships. Like,
Yes, very much so. They're
yeah,
very ardent, very passionate about their chosen show, their chosen fandom, and yeah, I completely agree. So we met in those dark dungeons of internet fandom back in the message board days in
yep,
the late 2000s, which in many ways was like the, halcyon days for the internet. Everything was, uh, that there used to be this quote like on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And it was all
nobody
this famous
knows that
like
you're a dog. I don't know if I've heard that.
it was like a cartoon. There was like a dog typing on a computer. This was back in like the 90s.
Oh,
And it was like
mm-hmm.
on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Right,
But it was
right.
like, back when the internet was full of possibilities and, you could meet all kinds of interesting people. And, regardless of how narrow slash specialized, your interest was, you could meet a community of people that share that interest, which I think is really great. And I think something with, social media and TikTok and whatnot, um, changed all that. And we don't really have that sense of found, community a lot anymore on the internet. But that's how we
Yeah.
met. And we met back in, I want to say it was about 2008, 2009, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I was like one of the later fans to come in into the show.
I was one of the medium fans. So Spring Awakening started on Broadway, and I believe it was 2006, late
2006 officially,
2006,
December
2007. Yeah, I
2006 at Atlantic, and then he came onto Broadway when, like January, right?
think so.
Oh no, they closed in January. I think they opened in like the spring of
Something. I'll take your
07,
word for
something like
it.
that.
They were right around either late
Um,
2006 or early 2007. I want to say. Um,
right.
I I first heard about the show and grew into the show really, I want to say like a few months after it started on Broadway. So it was like mid 2007. I wasn't really active in the fandom for a while or on the forum message boards, I should say. Um,
Hmm.
but then that kind of started. So we met around that time, and then and I guess I should say for those of you that don't know, I'm in Pennsylvania, in scenic Reading, Pennsylvania, which is about 2.5 hours outside of New York City. So, I wasn't quite local, but I did have the opportunity. I had the opportunity to, visit there a lot. And, it was pretty cool. We hung out a couple times, including with some mutual friends and did all that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
then, life got in the way and we stayed Facebook friends, but we kind of lost touch for a while.
Hmm.
And then randomly, I want to say several months ago, I, impulsively replied to one of your stories on Instagram.
Yeah.
And
And
I don't
we
even
just
rem
reconnected.
yes, and I don't even remember what the context of that was, but we reconnected and, a choir of angels sang, and it was a beautiful thing.
Indeed, indeed.
And now we're closer than
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, that it's an interesting sort of thing how much like the whole fan culture has changed since then.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like in a lot of ways it's intensified even more. I don't know if that's maybe because like I'm chronically online, so I'm in the pop culture chats on Reddit and like all of that. Um, but yeah, like with a
We were
huge
equally chronically online back in the TGO days, the
yeah, yeah.
back in the
I
days.
mean,
This message board, by the way, was called the Guilty Ones, which, when you say that, it's like the equivalent of saying Beetlejuice into your mirror. Like it
mhm,
conjures up all these, cringy fandom memories. But
mhm. Say it
yeah,
three
but it,
times, a
it was a
guilty
fun
one will
time.
pop up out of nowhere. Um,
But
yeah,
the chronically online nature never really changed for either of us, even if the venues, if the outlets for all that um, did.
the outlets have definitely changed.
Yes,
Yeah, forms of that kind aren't really around anymore.
I wish they were
Uh,
though.
yeah, I definitely miss that old school like setup, but yeah, I think we mostly see that now on like Tumblr and Reddit.
Reddit, yeah,
Um,
definitely Reddit.
definitely Reddit. Um, but yeah, uh, so yeah, 15 years since then, and I don't know, I feel like not much has changed in terms of yeah, the intensity of like just fandom, the Broadway world. Um,
Not much has changed with the intensity, but like we said, it's the way that intensity is directed. Like, this is me kind of like um media slash cultural theory nerding out a little bit here. But I like the like text-based sort of world, I want to say, that you could kind of dive into, that you could build and explore for yourself, that you had in those message boards and you had in like AIM chats and all that
right.
sort of thing. And Reddit is great. It's a decent substitute. You can find a subreddit for just about everything. But in some ways it's just not the same. And I mean it's different, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Um,
Hmm.
but it was a very intense time, and we were very passionate. We were very angsty, which is
Definitely
fitting.
angsty, which is definitely fitting for the show.
Which is fitting,
That
because
show definitely channeled a lot of our angst
the show that
collectively.
brought us together is um was built in a cauldron of teenage angst, and all the drama and complex emotions and feelings and whatnot that go along with that. So it's fitting.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and
This was supposed to be a
the
food chat, and then here we are.
I know we were going to talk about the culinary world, our obsession with Anthony Bourdain and everything, but I mean, we can always get into that later. But
It can be anything and everything.
yeah, this is totally like off script. This is like not yeah,
The
not
best
planned at all,
conversations
but
are. And
exactly.
but all of that just goes to show, Jess and I have known each other for a very long time, even if there was like a intermission slash hiatus in the midst of all that. But we met due to just kind of running in the same circles as far as theater, and the intersection of theater and fandom and internet culture and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then recently it's been, we've grown a lot closer, and we've realized that we have a hell of a lot more in common than, I think we realized back then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do remember like even on the forums, like, people, I mean, there was the general chat, of course, where people can just, shoot the shit about anything off, that's not related to theater or Spring Awakening at all. And
And they did.
um
Oh,
yeah,
they did.
and I do remember there being like a lot of crossover with like essay fans and Harry Potter fans, for
Mhm.
instance.
Redheads, Harry
We were
Potter,
definitely that generation. A lot of
a lot
like I
of late
remember,
2000s, like chronically online gay culture, if that makes sense. A lot
yeah,
of
definitely.
like nerd fighter John Green kind of fans were in there,
Yep.
which
Yeah, I
that
think that
might be
was
like a
sort of like
core
the
memory
start of
unlocked
that.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was definitely like on the cusp of like that whole wave of like nerd fighters and
Mhm.
um yeah, like lots of cinephiles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just like there was a huge sort of intersectional thing going on there with we were just like, fans of anything that was good and, you know, that
Oh yeah.
um
And
that
looking back
spoke to
on it,
us in different ways.
yeah, yeah. And looking back on it, there was a lot of I mean, there were a lot of really, when you think fandom, when you think fans, you think of these like chronically like obsessive people. You think of these people with like a single track mind and their entire life is wrapped up in this one show or this one band or this one movie or whatever the case may be. And there was some of that, but also looking back on it, there were a lot of really um passionate but also really intelligent, interesting, creative people that
Hmm.
got caught up in this community. And looking back on it now, 15 years later, I mean, it's really interesting to see all the different directions where these people have gone. Many
Oh
of them
yeah.
are in, you know, industries or in jobs where they profit off of this, their excellent taste in movies or their excellent taste in theater. Maybe they're working in house. I mean, one of my best friends is a working actress. You have people that work for the film industry doing social media, doing marketing, people that work for Broadway producers and you
Hmm.
have people like me that went into completely unrelated fields of endeavor. I'm a boring state government employee. That's what I do for a living.
Hmm.
And but it's been really interesting to see kind of where everybody is, where the chips have fallen. But like I said, there are a lot of really smart, creative people, and even back then. But they're still smart and creative, interesting people now, and I think that's really great. As
Oh wow.
you see, I mean, if you're one of those people that goes on the Walmart TikTok, I mean, I don't know why you would, but a lot of people do, I guess, because they
Hmm.
get millions of views. But
Right.
if you spend your day on the Walmart TikTok, you'll most likely see content that was created by a former guilty one, which is pretty cool, honestly.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, and similarly, like I guess in parallel, it's been interesting to sort of see the careers of like the people from Spring Awakening go on to so many
Oh
other
yeah,
great things. Um, like I've told you before, like it still like blows my mind that people even know who Leah Michelle and Jonathan Groff are. Um, yeah, it's interesting to sort of see, yeah, see things sort of play out. But yeah, I mean, everyone's gone on to great things. Johnny Gallagher's gonna be on Broadway soon with Swept
hmm
Away.
and he's still
Um,
doing amazing music. I mean,
Doing amazing music. I still have to like catch him at Rockwood. I like he keeps making 10 p.m.
you had
shows and
one
it's
job,
so
Jess. Come
late.
on, you're in New York. Come
I
on,
am
get
in New
on that.
York. I know. One of these days I'll get
You
out there
better. I will hold you to
and
that.
finally see him. Oh yeah, and that was another thing too. Our I don't know if you were ever friendly with Rachel, but she got to work on his recent tour. So
I
that's
never was,
another
but that's
example
really
of
cool.
yeah, that's another example of a guilty one living the dream, quite
And
literally.
2007, 2008, Rachel would be like doing cartwheels and like hyperventilating and like,
Uh-huh.
not able to fathom the idea that 2024 Rachel would be directly working. for that tour,
Hmm.
would be directly working for, they always say
Right.
never meet your heroes, but um I don't think that really applies in the Broadway or the theater world. It's
Yeah.
um
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't know.
that's definitely like um a really good example of just how like I guess beneficial like the tightness of that community can be. Like um you go to someone's shows as often enough, like you get to form some sort of relationship with, the people that you admire and stuff like that.
Right.
Um I don't know, like
Sometimes
it's been
it's a
interesting to sort of
one-sided, parasocial one, but sometimes
yeah.
it can be a very legitimate one.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
there were
interesting that you oh sorry.
no,
It's
no, go ahead.
interesting that you mentioned that because I was like literally watching something um about parasocial relationships the other day, and now that we're talking about this, I'm thinking about like whether like that sort of thing existed, or do you think that sort of thing existed within the Broadway
I think it
community? I
did.
mean, we were pretty intense
I think
fans
it
for sure.
absolutely did. We were in a more, I don't want to say a more analog world back then, but we were very much immersed in the whole, you know, part of that whole fandom was the like quote unquote stage door culture.
Yep.
There was this little, every time after you see the show, you'd go run around the back of the O'Neill and wait there at the stage door and get your playbill signed, even if you were seeing the show for the 87th time, and get your pictures with the cast, even though you met them for the 75th time.
Yeah.
And but it's cool. It was like a little bonding ritual in a way, But
Hmm.
the people that saw the show over and over, I think they absolutely did. I mean, the cast obviously recognized them. The cast known to like them. They did build some very legitimate um, bonds and friendships in many cases with the cast members. But at the same time, um, I think a lot of it was what we would now call parasocial relationships, but perhaps we didn't really have the language to describe it back then, or maybe
Maybe
just the fact that our
something
brains
somewhere
weren't
in
fully developed
between.
back then, and we thought of it differently, somewhere in between.
Well,
That's what you think.
somewhere in between. I don't know. I feel like that's even a much healthier route in terms of like if we're talking about parasocial relationships
I
because
do agree. I mean, when I think parasocial, I think mainly I don't think of it mainly as like a negative way. I think of the main meaning of it as being like one-sided,
Mhm.
and that's something big in like the internet culture now. You have all these influencers and all these people with, 700,000 followers on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, what have you. And, you follow the everyday, mundane things of their lives, and you feel like you know them, but they don't know you at all.
Yeah,
So I see it when I think parasocial, I just think of maybe like a one-sided kind of
right. Yeah,
relationship, without maybe the negativity or the loaded kind of context of that.
right.
So
Without it
with that
verging
in mind,
into
that's
the
kind of what I
creepy.
feel like that's kind of what we had back then with a lot of the
Right.
cats.
Yeah. It was definitely a time where it wasn't, social media as it is today wasn't really the same. Like, we followed everyone on MySpace. And if you wanted to flex, as the kids say, like you put, your favorite actors in your top eight or whatever. Um, and like, yeah, I do remember sort of like it was the early days of like, following people on Facebook, on MySpace, and like any sort of like picture that they would post that would come out or whatever, we like poured over it. Like, you know, the cast field trip to Jonathan Groff's farm, for instance. Like I remember when that was posted and like that was like the topic of conversation for the day.
So
Um,
the one that always sticks with me is the cast did like a series of YouTube videos for Valentine's Day in I guess
yes.
2007, and they were cute and we were like gushing over it. Um,
Mhm.
what's the other one I keep thinking of? That ad they did for what was it like Gap or
Gap.
Benetton or one of them kind of things. And if you look at it, it
Yeah.
is the most stereotypical 2000s outfit fashion choices and
Hmm.
I love it. But every time, 17 years later, I still look at that damn ad and it's like warm and fuzzy memories.
Hmm. Yeah. So there
But we
was an
gushed over
interesting
every
line
single bit of
there.
content, that
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't,
they put out.
it wasn't 24/7 like it is now where like someone will just like post a reel or whatever. Yeah, so we like any sort of new thing that would come out, was like the big news of the day and like yeah,
This
so
random bit of content came out, and immediately people would be, you know, like the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show with everybody screaming and shrieking, and
mhm.
uh,
Yeah,
uh, it,
yeah,
it's
definitely.
it's funny you say about the internet and Facebook being different now because unquestionably it is different now. But something funny that it reminded me of was um, like I had this thing, and don't ask me why I did this. I was a weird 18, 19-year old with a not fully developed brain, but I would I would just randomly add just about anybody on Facebook just for the hell of it. Whether it
Hmm.
was actors or just random people in the cast. I think I added members of the band at one point.
Yeah, I think I added people from the band on
You
MySpace.
know,
Yeah.
and random people from the forums too. Like,
Hmm.
but fun fact, that's how Zuri was one of my best friends. That's how we met because I randomly added her one day and we gradually started commenting on her posts and
Hmm.
gradually started talking. We didn't know each other back when Spring Awakening was actually going on, other than me just randomly adding her. But speaking of social media, uh, well, that happened. But the one actor that I keep thinking of in that regard is Alice Ripley because she
Yes,
had
she's very entertaining. Um, wasn't there someone who actually had the username Alice Ripley is fierce on there? I vaguely
was
remember.
there?
I I don't know, or
It
maybe it
wouldn't
was
surprise me
a
because
thread,
the only
but
thing more unhinged on that board than our personalities were the usernames that many of us chose.
yes, and they would like change like periodically too, depending on like what was going on
Oh
or
yeah,
like what
mine did
movie we had seen.
all the time. What was
Very
yours, Jess? I completely forget.
well, I guess I'm doxing myself now, but it's avant-garde. It was avant underscore guard, and then someone pointed out that I spelled it wrong. So then I had to like redo like the account. So yeah, so like it didn't like my membership thing, like member since like 2007 or whatever, it was like off because like I had to like make
No.
that new account.
That's
But
like the
yeah, that was
equivalent of
me.
losing like 1,000-day snap streak with somebody nowadays. Like, it's like a weird form of clout. Like you get to flex
Yeah.
on people how many posts you had, how long you've been a
Right.
member for, if you were one of the OGs.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we got all wrapped up in that.
I do. I remember that. I remember, yeah, just like crazy things would go on. Um, Interesting little cliques would form.
Oh, very interesting.
I remember like there were like rumors going around that like the cast like lurks all the time.
I mean, of course they did. It was
But of course, yeah,
the
it was
only like
the
most comprehensive
only
place on the internet for all your Spring Awakening needs was that
right,
unhinged forum. So, I mean,
right,
my
right,
username, by
right.
the way, was the U of some song. which
Oh,
is
wow.
a cute little bit from My Junk, which is still one of my favorite songs from the show.
Great
But yeah,
song,
it's
great
funny, you know,
song.
we all like staked our claims to like these various little bits of lyrics from the show or lines from the, you know, whichever whatever one was most meaningful to us, and you know,
Right.
it was
Good
very strange
times.
times.
Good, strange, crazy.
Yes, cringy,
Gosh, sometimes cringy, yeah. But
very embarrassing on
yeah.
occasion, very funny on occasion,
I mean, it's just like anything else in terms of
but very
like a
meaningful at the
fandom
same time. I mean, I
experience.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean, we
can honestly
definitely
say I
grew
met some
up
really
along
cool
with that
people.
show. Hmm.
Yeah,
Um, I think the first time I saw the show was when was that? I think it was like maybe the fall of 2007. And then, oh, okay. So the first sort of thing that I went to, Spring Awakening related, was the Bryant Park performance, the Broadway and Bryant Park.
mhm.
Um, and that was like that August. And then I actually got to see the show that fall. And then I think I saw the show again after the Tony announcements were made. And
But
that
that's when it
was, I
really started to get
remember,
big.
yeah. And I remember that
After the
energy
Tonys
was
specifically,
so
because
good.
they swept them. I mean, it you
Yeah.
know, it was this cool like little niche fandom thing, and you almost felt like a Broadway hipster in a way, like you were a fan of this
Yes.
cool show and the cool cast before it was
Hmm.
cool, before everyone else had found out about it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Especially that Tony's performance, like to see them on TV, to see this show and these people that like we were just like obsessing over for the past few months, like on TV, performing for the like,
it was
the whole
appointment
country.
viewing. I mean, I sat down
Yeah.
on the couch in front of the TV. I was not going to miss it.
Yeah. No, yeah, it definitely felt like we were in on a little secret that was
Right,
suddenly
exactly.
catching on. Um,
That's the
yeah.
best. You know, speaking of fandom in general, that's the best part of it for me. You know, is you know, being part of something in general is great, but being part of something that not a lot of other people know about is even better, because you know, not I don't know if it's like the exclusivity, but just the, you know, it's like an arbiter of good taste. Like you have good taste because you found out about this cool thing. You know, you're a
Hmm.
part of something that not everybody else is. It just hits different, you know, and that was the
Right.
way a lot of us felt. Um, a lot of us like early adopters kind of felt, you know, because there definitely was a wave of new fans and new people coming in after the Tonys and especially later on. And nowadays it would be like, okay, you know, you don't know all the lore, you know, we don't call it that, but
Hmm.
you know, it's like we were like the OGs, you know, we all the stuff we, you know, salivated and freaked out over every little bit of content, every little YouTube thing, and every media appearance and clip and whatnot. And it was our thing.
Hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned that because that was definitely something that I like having been a fan of Rent prior to that in high school. Obviously at that age, I wasn't part of like the OG fans of Rent, but
What you
so
mean
you
you
hear
weren't waiting in like the
stories,
rush lines when you were like 8 years old and
right?
10
No,
waiting for that, right?
definitely not. Unfortunately not. But
Your parents just
but
letting
no,
you into
yeah,
the city unsupervised. You can get your
right. Like
tickets and
camping
yeah,
out like in front of a theater,
yeah.
no.
Now, mind you,
Um,
there were kids that were like 13 that were Spring Awakening fans, that were seeing
Yeah.
the show 800 times, and their parents would like drive them into the city. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was wild. But no, but you coming from Rent was
Yeah, so like having heard stories about like OG Rent fans sort of like,
mm,
being a little uppity with like the newer fans was something that like always struck me as interesting. And then having to experience that with Spring
hierarchy of
Awakening was
fandom.
really like eye-opening. Yeah, to experience that in real time was really interesting. Um, but yeah, so especially as someone that was like semi late to the show. Um, I remember there would be sort of like that thing of like, oh, well, I got to see it while it was at Atlantic, kind of a thing, like I'm the OG of OGs or whatever.
The
Um,
gatekeeping and whatnot. That yeah,
yeah, yeah. So that's
I mean,
definitely
which
still
is
obviously
natural.
prevalent.
You wanna show your bona fides, and you want to be proud of all the work you put in, emotionally and being a fan of this thing, but
I mean,
it's
yeah, in retrospect now, of course, we know that that's,
like there's a difference
but
between
yeah,
like
it's
jokingly like flexing on people, which I think was a lot
mhm.
of it with Spring Awakening. I don't think Spring Awakening had a lot of like the cliquishness as far as like the old fans versus the new fans. I mean, there
Oh,
was
yeah,
some of
no.
that, but
There
it was
wasn't
a
like
pretty welcoming fandom,
it was
especially compared to like
welcoming,
Rent, Wicked, and all
yeah,
those like gateway
but
shows I call them.
yeah, but I do feel like there was kind of an unspoken hierarchy, or maybe not hierarchy, but like
Absolutely,
an unspoken thing of like, yeah, like you're a newer
absolutely,
fan, we can tell. But
absolutely. Because I mean, and this goes all the way back full circle to what we were talking about, the stage door and the culture, and building these social slash parasocial, whatever you want to call them, relationships
yeah.
with the cast. It's the ones that put in the work and the ones that were like the early fans, that got to hang out at the stage door and just chat to all the cast like they were normal people back
Hmm.
before the Tonys when everyone and their mom started learning about the show. I mean, that's cool, and that's the benefit of being that kind of a fan. Um,
Hmm.
but it definitely did it kind of showcase a little bit of a hierarchy, like, hey, I was here before you were, and now as a result, I have all these, memories of, just chatting with Jonathan Groff at the stage door. I almost said Leah Michelle, but I don't think she ever chatted with people at the stage door. She was very standoffy. But
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. It was definitely, yeah, it straddled that line, I think. That whole culture, um, stage dooring
can
and
I say one other
everything.
thing to just kind of like throw this into the discussion here?
Hmm.
The Rent to Spring Awakening fandom pipeline. Can we just talk about that?
I mean, yes, but it's also you almost
So
kind of
many people
yeah.
followed
I
that
mean,
and like
it's
follow the yellow brick
very
road. They started out as rent heads, and then
yeah,
they got into this other show about angsty um young people. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, rocking out. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
This
Rent was
other
the
rock show about sex and death. Like it's right up
yeah,
their alley. Like
exactly. But I mean, yeah, I think you can definitely draw a straight line from like Hair to Rent to Spring
yes,
Awakening. I think without those shows, you wouldn't have shows that came after like American Idiot.
absolutely
What Hades Town now is the big
right.
one. Um, that whole thing of like, oh, and
Let us bow
Hamilton, how
down
can
to
we
the
not?
great Lilius White, the queen of all theater,
Yes,
the
Lilius White.
goddess of let us worship. Yes.
Hmm.
No, I
But
completely agree with you. I mean, Hair was the one that started it all. It really it was. We talk about Spring Awakening being groundbreaking, but um, it was maybe groundbreaking in subject matter, I guess, in a way, in plot, but Hair was absolutely transformational as a piece of theater. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
there
it
definitely is
definitely
a
did
straight
that
line
thing.
between Hair and Rent, and then Spring Awakening was almost like the one that came after, but it was also the one that came before, like even Next to Normal, shows like that.
Right. Yeah, I think, yeah, all those shows definitely sh share the same sort of DNA in terms of like incorporating popular music into theater. Um, we saw that done very exquisitely and very well with Hamilton,
Absolutely.
in a way that only Lin-Manuel can do.
Lin-Manuel just tapping into that vein of,
Mhm.
and having so much, crossover general public adoration of this show, which is, you know, and it's great.
Yeah,
But, I think we both kind of got into theater or had our, theatrical awakening, so to speak, right in that like sweet
pun
spot where there was so many
intended. Pun
pun
intended.
exit pun very, very much intended. But we had our awakening right in that couple year period where there were so many amazing shows going on, Spring
Yeah.
Awakening just started off, and then the Hair revival, and then Next to
In the
Normal,
Heights was
In
around
the
that
Heights,
time as
yeah,
well as
American
well.
Idiot, and just, right in that, I guess it was about 3, 4 years then, where there were just so many solid hits that, they were just fantastic, and obviously we look on the past kind of with rose-colored glasses, and we always think the first show that we saw is the greatest show ever. But
Hmm.
um we really had it lucky, I think, for a while
Oh
there,
yeah,
and
definitely.
we
Yeah,
really let
we
ourselves
were.
get emotionally invested and attached, and more dedicated to those shows, I think, than people are now for what's on Broadway now. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely came of age at a very interesting point. Um
Very
yeah, all those
opportune
shows were
time,
just
I
like
think.
coming off like one by one, and then yeah, to sort of like compare that now to where Broadway is now, post COVID has been is it's a definitely interesting. Um I don't know that I really see sort of the same fandom fervor for any one particular show.
Neither do
Um,
I. I mean, it's
Probably
just
not
different
since
now, and
Hamilton, I don't think.
it just feels different now, and it's not necessarily worse, but it's not the same level of fervor, like you said. I don't think there's the same level of intensity, or single-minded, if you want to call it, obsession with one show or these two shows, and because it seems like lately they come and they go. It's
Yeah, yeah. I feel like yeah, the theater scene is definitely still finding its identity.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to sort of note. They're definitely trying to still get the young ones in with
mhm,
like Hades Town and like Six, which have been really
right.
successful,
I
but
haven't seen that
like
yet.
I haven't seen it either. Neither with Hades Sound, but yeah, it's interesting that I
It was an
don't know that
interesting
it's
time
really
time
grabbing
to
the young audience in the same way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the our perception of the shows back then, we felt a lot closer to them. We felt less detached, I want to say. And I mean, I don't know if this actually has anything to do with it, but like, back in the day, you remember Pepperidge Farm remembers, back in the day, we would scribble our names on a scrap of paper and put it in the hat, and they'd physically draw the names, for the,
Right.
yes, and now it's everybody can just do online and they'll just throw random people at it. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have the same closeness, you don't, you have
Yeah.
these like emotional bonds, and got to know all the people you were standing in the rush line with, and
Right. Seeing the
you
same
know
faces at the same
right,
events and things like
see the
that.
same shows at the same time, and
Hmm.
it's you're in the same place in the same time in the same environment among the same like-minded people that you already had that commonality with. So it was
Yeah.
really easy to build a community, I think, and that's why maybe that's why fandom feels different now.
Hmm. Right. Or maybe we've just simply aged out and we're just
Yeah,
like
or
old
maybe we're just
cronies
old.
now
Yeah.
or something. I don't know. I don't know if I'm like still with the in crowd in that sense,
This is the
but
point where you want to do the, coming up next time, the music, boom, boom, or maybe we're just old. And with that,
right. Yeah, that should be our cue. Uh,
I,
yeah.
but I will say this, Spring Awakening came to me personally at the perfect time in my life. I was 17, which I think is absolutely the peak of the perfect age to get involved in a show like that.
Hmm.
And more importantly, to just get in a fandom and just find something you're obsessed with like that. So it was really,
Hmm.
I mean, if I'd been in my early 20s or if I'd been younger, 14, 15, and getting into that show for the first time, it I feel like my experience with it would have been completely different.
Yeah.
Just like, listening to the show now in my 30s as a completely different experience and brings up all these
Right.
completely different emotions now that, and different layers of meanings and everything now. I mean, it was just um it was a very opportune time, I feel like, to get involved
Yeah.
in and to get involved with all these good shows.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, for me, it was definitely the appeal of seeing people around my age command a stage
Yes.
and it wasn't just like one person or a couple of people. It was like
The whole
most
cast.
of the cast.
Right.
Except for the two adults. Like, yeah, it was
And
all
and the part
young
that's
people, and it
wild
was just
now,
so powerful to see.
yes. And the part that's wild now thinking about it is like Frances McConaughey Anthony, who played the adult women. Um
Yes.
she was younger when the show started on Broadway than I am now. I'm
Oh
34, and I
wow.
think she was 28, 29 when
Oh
that
wow,
show started,
really?
which
Wow.
is mind-blowing to me because we looked up to her as this like, cool aunt slash mother figure, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, if it doesn't put into perspective, like, yeah, I feel old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the cast was
Um,
the same age. You could just, you could see them as people and not as these like ridiculously talented, acting, singing gods and goddesses, but they were just cool, really talented people that were relatable, that were approachable, and that you kind of throw that into the cauldron of fandom and stir that a little bit, and that's where a lot of that came from too, I think.
right. Yeah. Um, Speaking of older, what did you think about the Spring Awakening documentary that came out? I think was that last year when it came out? Um,
The one, the one that was on HBO, the one that was
yes.
where they were splicing the press reels
The
from the original Broadway
anniversary.
with the anniversary thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So first of all, I was so mad when that came out because I was hoping to get tickets for that reunion concert. And I
Right.
remember I even took my lunch break early at work because the
Oh
tickets went on
wow.
sale at, I think it was noon. And I wanted to be there right when it opened and get tickets so I could see that. It didn't work out that way because when I logged in, the only ones that were available were like $500. And it's like,
Oh wow, yeah.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
no,
I do
I
remember
am not
that.
paying this for this kind of show. So here's the part that's probably going to blow your mind that actually I don't think I've told you. So would you believe me if I told you I actually never got to see Spring Awakening when it was on Broadway?
No, I wouldn't have believed that at all.
That is the God's truth. I actually never got to see it when it was on Broadway. For all my emotional involvement and all the time and effort and the years that I spent immersed in that whole fandom, it was always at a distance. I never actually got to see the show live on Broadway.
Oh wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Um, well, that makes me a little sad for you now. Um, but yeah, I
Hey, at
mean,
least
I
there's
was
the upcoming revival, which they're
that's
gonna do.
true,
They're gonna
that's true. It's
do
always
the
going to be
cash cow of
revived.
it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
they anything. It's millennial bait is what it's gonna be at this
All
point.
right, right. But I mean, yeah, so I mean, like I said, I was like, wasn't allowed out a lot, but like, so I only got to see it like maybe two or three times. So again, like I wasn't like a repeat offender, but yeah,
Well,
like
here's a
hearing people talk about like the onstage seating and everything and which one was the best, like and like I got this seat or whatever,
I
like
would
that
have just
was
been
like kind
happy
of
to just be
confusing for
there.
me.
It's like, right.
Well, yeah, that's true, but like that was always like confusing to me in terms of like, oh, like how do they know all this? And like obviously, these are people that got to see the show so much.
Mhm.
But for the final performance, I caught the matinee and I got BB8 and I was like, is that a good seat? I don't know. And like apparently it was a very good seat because that was I think was that when Taylor Trench was in the show? Who was it? Um so like where I sat was like I got to basically just like interact with one of the actors or whatever, so it turned out to be a very good seat. Um,
Nice, good for you.
so yeah.
For the final matinee, I mean that's
For the
priceless.
final matinee, I mean,
Yeah,
what more
you
can you
can't beat
ask
that.
for, right? Yeah, it
The
was,
only the only closing night I've been to was Hair back in 2010, and I was
oh
literally in
wow.
the very last row in the very back of the balcony, and
Oh wow.
the
Really?
acoustics were terrible, but
Oh
it
no.
was. But I have never felt more love and more passion and more gratitude
Hmm.
in a theater. Just emanating from that whole house, and it was just
Yeah.
an absolutely magical night. So
Yeah. Was Gavin Creel still in the
yes,
show at that point?
I don't think so. No,
Oh,
I'd have to check the cast. I honestly, I
he
my mind
probably
is
left at
completely
that
drawn a
point.
blank who the cast was, but I feel like they had a replacement cast at that point, or at least
Right,
partially.
right. But yeah, I mean, of course, hair like that, the energy, like I don't think you even need like on stage seating or whatever
Right,
to feel the energy from that show. I
right.
remember like attending the Tonys back in 2009.
Did
And
you?
that was when they performed. I did. I
I didn't
lined
know
up
that.
for those
Okay,
tickets.
now you're
Yeah, that
flexing
was
on
the
me. Okay, I
year.
get it.
Yeah, that
Go
was the
ahead, Jess. Keep
year.
flexing.
No, yeah, that was the year that they were allowing they did like a lottery thing for students to be able to like attend.
Oh, okay.
Um
Yeah, you were a hunter back then,
so
right?
yes. So yeah, I definitely lined up for those tickets. Got to go. So I got to see them perform and I like vividly remember just energy bouncing off the walls
Oh,
during their performance.
there were
And yeah, I
parts
was
like, and it's one I
rewatching
distinctly remember because the first half of Electric Blues, you couldn't even
uh
hear them sing because people were just screaming and cheering so loud. It
Right,
was
right.
just, the most electrifying atmosphere I've ever seen in a theater, and it was just
Oh,
a,
I'm
a
sure.
fantastic night.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so I was rewatching the Tony's performance because of Gavin Creel passing the other day. Um,
R.I.P. It's
RIP
so
to a
sad.
good one. Very, very sad. But yeah, talking about like fan moments, that obviously was a huge fan moment. Being able to attend that performance. Um, yeah.
But
So,
but going back to what you were saying about, only having seen the show a couple times and, me never getting to see the show. So here's another fun fact. I had plans and I had a ticket to finally see the show in, I want to say it was like 2008 sometime, just see a random Saturday matinee. And long story short, my mother would not let me go and see the show. She threatened me with all kinds of things if I went and saw it. So I ended up not seeing it. But it was the particular show I had tickets to was possibly the most random assortment of understudies that
oh wow.
ever were assembled in that cast for one performance. Like Brian Charles Johnson was Moritz.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I,
And
I
I
definitely
forget
would have
someone
liked to
else
see his
was
Moritz.
Melchior. I forget who was Ilsa. It was one of those
Was it
one of the
Phoebe?
other I don't even remember, to be honest with you. It was a different Melchior. No, there was a different Moritz. There was a different Wendla.
Mm,
It
right,
was like the last person on the understudy list was the one that played Wendla
right.
that day. And I think there was a different Ilsa too. I think it was only like Melchior, whoever the normal Melchior was at that time,
Wow.
plus the rest. I mean, it was like the theatrical equivalent of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, like, here, whoever
Right,
fits into this costume, get on stage and make this show. Like the show must go
right.
on.
Yeah,
So
some crazy
that
things were happening at
yeah,
that
that
during
was
that day, obviously.
the magic of that like Franken show was the
Right.
one that I had tickets to see. So I mean,
Interesting.
I don't feel like I missed much on that particular day. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I regret not seeing the show live, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's funny, how you can still have all that emotional involvement and attachment and whatnot to that particular
Right.
fandom. And it doesn't matter if you've seen the show 0 times or 126 times,
Right.
you still feel the same way about it. And
Yeah.
that's part of the magic of it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned like the whole understudies thing because I remember Spring Awakening being like sort of the first show where I experienced not only like a huge appreciation for like the whole cast and the whole fandom for that, but like people actually fawning over the understudies and sometimes even preferring like a certain understudy in a role. Um, so yeah, so that was like my first brush with like people like actually knowing certain understudies and swings names and everything and like all of that and like
I
every
mean, they
like
they
show
wanted to
after
they
that.
wanted to see every single Moritz or every single
Right,
Melchior or every single Venla. I mean, they to
right.
check off all the boxes and get the full, I guess, experience of the character. But I mean, it's when you're that devoted, it's like, okay, if you see Jonathan Groff, Leah Michelle, Johnny Gallagher, if you see
Yeah,
them 78 times doing the same roles, it's
right,
great. But eventually you want to see something new and you want to see a different take on it. You want to see something interesting. So, I mean, it, it,
right,
it kind of makes sense to me.
right. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and now it's kind of the norm now to sort of just like know who like literally everyone is. I mean, that was definitely the case like when I got really into like my Hamilton obsession a few years ago and like, you know, we also like showed some love for um Sasha Hutchings and like all everyone else in that cast. So yeah, it was definitely the first show where I definitely saw like an example of that.
And I feel like the difference with Hamilton is, most of the time, most I want to say normal people can't afford to see the show enough times to see all the different understudies
Hmm.
because, it's hard enough to be able to afford to get tickets to see the show once or see any show multiple times lately, which is a whole different topic of discussion. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One thing that I can ask you is sort of what is inspiring you lately in terms of like um what you're seeing, what you're watching. Is there any new show that on Broadway or off that you've been interested in?
Oh, this is your podcast is, I guess, about the creative process and creativity in general. And I mean, theater is obviously a great form of that. But I've been dipping my toes into a lot of different spaces. I've been trying to get back into piano. I played piano for a long time. I've been trying to just music, the general music that I listen to every day. I've been getting really on a jazz kick, which I've always appreciated jazz. I've always enjoyed listening to it, but it was one of those things where I listened to like my comfort albums, or I listened to, six or, 6 or 8 albums in rotation that I particularly like. But I've been trying to branch out, and I've been trying to appreciate the creativity and the creative process, but more so um, understand it like systematically, understand the history of it. So I've been
Hmm.
listening to a lot of like keeping with like the jazz metaphor. I've been listening to a lot of like early jazz, like New Orleans jazz, swing, Dixieland stuff, which is really the roots of where it came from. Louis Armstrong and all that sort of thing. And, same thing with I kind of did the same thing with classical music. I was trying to, I guess, understand the timeline of it and the various composers that all had different creative processes, but they all built on um the people that came before them and the creativity that came before them. So I was trying to whatever kind of media it is, whether it's music, whether it's theater or what have you. Um, I've been trying to look at things through that lens and get a sense of the history and, to see the progression of the creative process and the progression of the art and um, the cultural artistic background in that. So that's really what's been driving me lately is, I've been on a jazz kick, I've had my classical kick, but at heart I'm a little bit of a history nerd and I always will be. And that I think that perspective is 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 important to me for when I encounter any kind of art, I think.
Well, great. I mean, yeah, it's definitely great to sort of look back um to sort of the origins of a certain art form and see where how it's evolved and everything.
That could be a
Um,
whole nother podcast by
that
itself.
can
I
be a
mean, that could be
whole
a whole
nother
episode 2. Stay
conversation.
tuned, folks.
Stay
We will
tuned.
absolutely be continuing this conversation. I don't know about continuing where we left off because, we've been on so many different tangents. It's like a
Hmm.
Christmas wreath going all around and around here. But this has been really fun.
Oh yeah, thanks. Thanks again for taking the time out to chat with me.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you for having me. It's been great to it's fun to ramble sometimes, but
Hmm.
we ramble and we both say smart, interesting, funny things. And that's why, you know, doing this podcast is great. It's fun. So I'm looking forward to guest starring on here again soon.
Thanks, Josh. Talk to you
Thank
again
you,
soon.
internet fans, internet um, listeners at home and abroad, wherever you may be.
You can follow Josh at Your Own Peril, har har, on Instagram at Further Down 5. Cultivate is produced, presented, and conceived by Jessica Taghap and is a resident artist production. Our intro music is by Bowden Kuzmin, and our outro is by Taffy Rhythm. New episodes are available weekly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Substack, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube and get updates on residentartists.substack.com.